Rain came down the Kesterly Road in ropes that afternoon, and the woman walking it would not get into the carriage that had stopped beside her. The gentleman inside had leaned across and opened the door himself, which was not a thing his sort did, and he held it against the wind and looked at her the way a man looks at a sum that will not come right. "You will be soaked to the bone before the milestone," he said. "Get in." "I thank you," she said. "And no, it is my own carriage. There is nothing in it to fear." "There is your name on the panel," she said, "and mine is nobody's, and by the time we reach the yard, there would be a story attached to both." "I would rather the rain." She touched the wet flank of his nearside horse as she said it, without thinking, the way another woman might have touched a wall for balance, and her hand ran down under the trace and stopped. "Your offside leader is going short on the near fore," she said. "You have a mile of hill before the inn. I would not push him up it." Then she walked on, and did not look back, and the rain took her into its grey. He could have driven past her. That is what a man does with a stranger who has refused him. Instead, he told his coachman to hold the horses to a walk, and he stepped down into the wet himself, and he followed her up the Kesterly Road on foot at a distance of 30 yards, to see what a woman like that would do when she thought no one was measuring her. What she did was walk to the Marigold, the coaching inn at the top of the hill, and go round to the yard rather than the door, and take off her sodden bonnet and begin to work. The Marigold was dying, though it did not yet know it was dead. The Turnpike Commissioners had voted in the spring to carry the new road along the valley bottom, 2 miles east, and every coach that had changed horses in that yard for 80 years would within the 12-month be changing them somewhere else. The stables held 16 stalls and 11 horses, and 4 of the 11 were not fit to work. The straw was old. The corn bin had weevil in the bottom third. 2 of the postboys had already gone for wages elsewhere, and the head ostler had died in February of a chest that the damp got into, and no one had replaced him, because there was no money to replace him with, and the man who owned the place had stopped coming down to the yard at all. His name was Ashcott. He had come to the inn 8 years before, as a young man who meant to make something of it, and had instead watched the road be voted away from under him. His wife had died the second winter. He was not proud, though the county said he was. He was a man who had stopped speaking because everything he had ever said aloud about the future had been wrong, and a man who is wrong, often enough in public, learns to say nothing at all. He kept to the small parlour at the back and let the yard fail by inches, and could not have told you the last time he had looked a horse in the mouth, though he had once been able to read a mouth as well as any dealer between there and the sea. The woman's name was Sarah Vane, and she had come to the Marigold 3 days before this, on foot, with a character in her pocket from a posting house 40 miles north that had closed its doors. She had asked the tapster for work, and the tapster, who had no authority to give it and no master willing to be asked, had let her sleep in the loft over the harness room on the understanding that this was not the same as employing her. She had spent the 3 days making herself indispensable in the hope that indispensability would harden into a wage. She was 23, plain, with the reddened hands of someone who had never in her life been kept, and a way of standing very still that people mistook for meekness until they crossed her. Now she came into the yard out of the rain, and the young horse in the far stall, the one nobody would go near, that had put a postboy against the wall the week before, swung its head over the door and watched her, and she talked to it low while she wrung her skirts, in the flat, unbothered voice of a person who has never once been afraid of a horse and does not intend to start. Ashcott stood in the arch of the gate, out of the light, and watched her do it, and did not go in. He saw her go along the stalls in the failing afternoon and lift each near 4 in turn, not because anyone had asked her to, but because that was what the yard needed, and no one else would. He saw her stop at the 4th horse, the grey mare with the standing swelling, and set the foot down, and stand looking at it with her hands on her hips, and he heard her say, to the boy who had drifted over to watch, "This is not the shoulder, whatever the farrier told you. Look where the heat is. It is the foot. There is matter under the sole here, on the inside quarter, and it wants finding and letting out, and until it is let out, she will not put weight on it, and everyone will go on saying she is shoulder lame, and resting her, and she will get worse." Farrier said shoulder, the boy said. The farrier said shoulder, because the shoulder is where she is holding it, and he looked no further, because it was raining, and he wanted his dinner. She ran her thumb round the coronet, slow, watching the mare's eye. "Fetch me a bucket, hot as the kitchen will give it, and the searching knife off the wall, and a double handful of bran. I will not cut into her tonight. I will draw it down where I can reach it, and tomorrow when it has come to a head, I will let it, and she will be sounder in a week than she has been in a month." The boy went for the bucket. Ashcott, in the arch, understood that he had refused this woman a place in his carriage an hour ago, and that she had walked up his own hill and diagnosed a horse he had given up as spoiled, and he found he could not go into his own yard and say so, and so he turned and went back to the parlour and sat and did not light the candle. Sarah found the abscess where she had said it would be, and by the 3rd day the grey mare was bearing weight, and word of that went round the yard the way such things do. It was the tapster, whose name was Corney, who put it into words, standing in the harness-room door, with his arms folded, while she oiled a bridle that had gone stiff from neglect. Corney was 60, and had poured drink at the Marigold for 40 years, and had buried a wife and both his sons, and was too tired to be unkind to anyone, which in that yard passed for warmth. He had known Ashcott since the man arrived, and he had watched him close up like a fist. "You mended the grey," he said. "I let an abscess," she said. "Any farrier could have. This one didn't. You've been here 4 days, and you've done more in the yard than's been done since Michaelmas." He watched her hands. "There's no wage in it, you know. He'll not come down and offer you one. He'll not come down at all. Then I'll work without one until there's one to be had," she said, "or until he tells me to go. A dry loft and the horses is better than the road. I have had the road." She hung the bridle on its hook and reached for the next. "Why does he not come down?" Corney was quiet a while. The rain had stopped and the yard dripped. "He came here meaning to be somebody," he said at last. "Bought into the inn when the road was the great road, and the coaches ran 9 a day through this arch. Told everyone the Marigold would see them all out. Told the commissioners to their faces they'd never move the road, staked his name on it in the assembly rooms in front of the whole county, and they moved it, voted it away in an afternoon, and never looked at him. He shifted his weight. His wife took a fever the winter after, and he sat up with her, and she died anyway, and he'd told her, too, that they'd come right. He's a man that said a great many things would be well, missus, and not one of them was, and he's took the lesson to heart, that a man had best say nothing. So he says nothing, and the yard rots, because saying nothing to a rotting yard is the same as telling it to rot. Sarah oiled the leather and said nothing herself for a moment, because there was nothing to say that would not have been one of the cheerful things the man had learned not to trust. "He was wrong about the road," she said finally. "He was not wrong about the horses. A man who was ever any good with horses does not stop being good with them because a committee moved a road. He's not looked at a horse in a year, Then he is not looking, she said. That is a different thing from not knowing how. That evening, she found the searching knife she had used on the grey mare had been sharpened and honed and hung back in its place, better than she had left it, and a second, finer knife laid beside it that had not been on the wall before, oiled against rust, the sort a man keeps who once did this work himself. No one said anything about it. She stood and looked at the two knives on the wall for a while, in the lantern light, and then she went up to the loft. Are you somewhere dry tonight, wherever you are listening, out of the rain that soaked poor Sarah on the Kesterly road? Stay in the warm a while, and stay with me. The fire's lit and the story's only turning now. The next meeting between them was not in the yard but in the corn. Sarah had found the weevil in the corn bin and would not feed fouled corn to horses that were already down in condition, and so she had gone looking for the man who could authorize the buying of clean corn, and had run him to ground at last in the small back parlor, where he sat over an unlit fire, with the account books open in front of him, and not a figure entered in a fortnight. The corn is bad, she said, from the doorway, without preamble, because preamble was for people who expected to be received. The bottom third of the near bin is weevil-struck, and the rest will go the same way inside the month, stored as it is. I have moved what is sound into the dry, but there is not 4 weeks' feed in it for 11 horses, and 4 of the 11 need building, not maintaining. You must buy corn, or you must sell horses, and if you sell them in the state they are in, you will be robbed. Ashcott looked at her. It was the first time they had stood in a room together since the carriage, and she saw him place her, and saw him decide not to mention it. There is no money to buy corn, he said. Then there is money to be got from selling the 2 coach horses that will never pull a coach again, but would carry a farmer well enough, and I can tell you which 2 and what they are worth, and you can sell them for it, instead of for what a dealer will offer a man who has stopped coming to his own yard. She came into the room, the bay gelding with the curb, and the Roman-nosed one that broke his wind last winter. They are eating their heads off and doing no work, and they are worth £11 the pair to the right man and 6 to the wrong one. Sell them right, buy corn, and the yard lives till the quarter. He was quiet. Then he said, You have been here 5 days, 6, and you have counted my corn and valued my horses and found the money I did not know I had. There was no anger in it. It was nearer to the tone of a man watching a thing he had thought broken start to turn over. Why? Because the horses are hungry, she said, and I am in the yard, and that is reason enough for anyone. You do not have to make it a mystery. She set a folded paper on the table, in her own hand, small and exact. That is the 2 horses, their faults, and the price. That is the corn, the quantity, and where to get it clean. You need not take my word. You knew horses once yourself. Read it, and see if I am wrong. She left him with the paper. He read it. She was not wrong. He sold the 2 horses the following week for £10 and 15 shillings, which was nearer her figure than the dealer's, and he bought the corn, and he did not tell her he had done it, but the clean corn appeared in the mended bin, and the account book had a figure in it again, the first in a fortnight, in his own hand. That was the shape the days took at the Marigold, into the turn of the season, as the wet spring came on toward a green and dripping summer, and the yard that had been dying began, without anyone declaring it, to live. He courted her without either of them calling it that, in the only language he still trusted, which was the language of things done and not spoken of. She said one evening to Corney that the light in the harness room was too poor to mend by after 5 o'clock, and she was ruining her eyes. The next evening there was a lamp in the harness room, a good one, on a bracket she had not put up, at the exact height of a seated woman's work. She never asked who. She knew who. She lit it and mended by it and said nothing, because to say something would have obliged him to say something, and she understood by now that his silences were not empty and must not be filled. The grey mare came fully sound, and then the young horse that had put the postboy against the wall, the one nobody would handle, Sarah took in hand over the space of a fortnight, standing in its stall an hour at a time doing nothing, until the day she led it out into the yard on a loose rope, with no more fuss than leading a dog. Ashcott watched that from the parlour window. He had handled that colt himself, a year before he stopped, and it had frightened him, which was part of why he had stopped. He watched a woman half his size walk it round the yard on a slack rope in the June light, and he came out, for once, into his own yard. "How?" he said. "Time," she said. "He is not vicious. He was handled by someone in a hurry, and he learned that hands mean hurry, and hurry means pain, and I have spent a fortnight teaching him that my hands mean nothing at all is about to happen. That is the whole of it. There is no gift in it. There is only being unhurried, which is a thing a frightened animal has almost never met." Ashcott stood at the colt's head and put his hand on its neck, and the colt let him, and something crossed his face that he turned away so she would not see. "I used to be able to do that," he said. "You can do it now," she said. "You just did." "I stopped." "I know." She looked at him across the colt's back in the plain daylight. "You stopped because a thing you were sure of came apart in front of the whole county, and you decided the fault was in your judgment and not in your luck, and you have not trusted yourself to be sure of anything since. But you were right about this colt just now. Your hand knew. The knowing did not go anywhere. You only stopped listening to it." He did not answer that, but he did not go back into the parlour either. He stayed in the yard the rest of that afternoon and the day after, and slowly, over the green weeks, the man came back down into the place he had been hiding from, 1 hour at a time, and the yard felt it, and the horses felt it, and Corny watched it and said nothing to anybody, and cleaned glasses, and let himself hope, which was a thing he had given up along with the man he served. The corn was clean, and the horses were up in flesh, and the young colt was leading like a lamb, and the long light came sideways into the yard and lay gold on the cobbles, and Sarah sat on the mounting block, plaiting the grey mare's tail out of pure idleness, and Ashcott came and sat on the water trough edge a little way off, and neither of them had a single practical thing that needed saying. "You have done that mare's tail 4 different ways this week," he said. "I have. It is the only creature in this yard vain enough to appreciate it, and a woman must practice her arts on someone. It looked well the way you had it Tuesday. Tuesday was a pulled plait, which is well enough for a working mare, but common. This is a stitched plait, which is what you would do for a fair, and which no one for 20 miles will ever see, and which I am doing entirely, because the evening is fine, and I have nothing better." She tied off the end. "Do not tell me it is a waste of good twine. I know it is a waste of good twine. That is the pleasure of it." "I was going to say," he said, "that I did not know there were 4 ways to plait a tail." "There are 9, she said. "I know 6. The other 3 are for the sort of establishment that has a man employed only to plait, and I have never been near one, and I do not think you have either, so we are as ignorant as each other, which is restful." She glanced at him. "You are trying to talk to me about nothing. It does not come easily to you." "No," he admitted. "You are doing it very badly." "I am aware. Keep on," she said, not unkindly, and went back to the tale. "You will get the way of it. It is like the colt. Nothing is about to happen. That is the whole trick of talking about nothing. You have to believe that nothing is about to happen, and then it doesn't, and then it is pleasant. She started a new plait, a French one, for no reason at all. Tell me a thing that does not matter. Anything. The first horse you ever rode. Whether you take sugar. Which of Corny's stories you have heard so often, you could tell it yourself. The one about the bishop's coach and the goose, he said. God help me, I could recite it in my sleep. I have not heard that one. You will. You will hear it at least 4 times before the summer is out, and each time the goose is bigger and the bishop angrier, and you must look surprised each time, or he is wounded. How big is the goose currently? Last telling, the size of a spaniel. And the bishop? Apoplectic. Purple. There was a curate the size of the goose in the last telling too. Come to think, that was not in the first, and I do not know where the curate has come from, and I have not the heart to ask. Sarah laughed. Properly, the first time he had heard it, and it was not a pretty sound, it was a real one, and the grey mare flicked an ear at it, and Ashcott sat on the edge of the trough in the gold light, and thought that he had not passed half an hour so idly in 3 years, and could not think why he had denied himself the whole of it. Neither of them said anything of the kind. She plaited the mare's tail 6 ways as the light went, and he told her about the first horse he ever rode, which was a fat pony called Samson that bit, and the evening cost them nothing, and gave them the thing that is hardest to come by, and never once named, and when it was full dark, she undid all 6 plaits, so the mare would be comfortable in the night, and that was the whole of it. Not everyone at the Marigold was glad the yard was living again. A man named Tuller kept the accounts and the ordering when Ashcott would not, and had done for 2 years, and had grown used to a master who signed what was put in front of him, and asked nothing. Tuller was the agent for a corn factor 2 towns over, and had for those 2 years been buying the inn's corn dear, and pocketing the difference, and buying it foul, because foul corn could be had cheaper still, and a master, who never came to the yard, never saw the weevil. He was a plausible man, soft-spoken, always with a reason, and he had not reckoned on a woman who counted the bins. He came to Sarah in the harness room, where the lamp burned at the height of her hand, and he did not threaten her, because plausible men do not threaten. They explain. You have stirred a great deal up, he said pleasantly, in a very short time, for a woman with no place here, no wage I hear, no character anyone has written to, sleeping in a loft on the tapster's charity. He leaned in the door. It is a precarious sort of position, is it not, to be so very busy in another man's yard, a word in his ear about a servant who oversteps, and where would you go? Back to the road, I should think. He smiled. I only mean that a wise woman in your place would mind her own corner and let the ordering be done by them as have always done it. There is a comfort in that. I could see you kept comfortable. Sarah set down the trace she was mending and looked at him for a while. You buy the corn, she said. I see to the ordering, yes. You buy it foul and you buy it dear, and you have been doing it 2 years, and the difference between what the book says and what the corn is worth has gone somewhere, and it has not gone into the horses, because I have seen the horses. She stood up. I have the bin, Mr. Tuller. I have what is in it, and what the book says was paid for it, and any factor's boy could tell you clean corn from weevil, and any honest man could tell you 8 shillings from 12. You did not reckon on anyone in the yard who could read a corn bin, because for 2 years there was not one. There is now. The smile held, but it had gone stiff at the edges. You would take the word of a loft girl over the man who has kept this house's books through its hardest years. I would take the word of the corn, she said. The corn does not care whose loft I sleep in. Now take your comfort out of my harness room. The lamp is mine, and I am mending by it. He went, but she saw, as he went, that he was not frightened yet, only warned, and that a plausible man who is warned goes away to arrange his ground, and she knew she had not finished with him. Then, at the black turn of a night in late summer, the thing the yard could lose in an hour began to happen. It was fire, and it began in the hayloft over the far stable. From a lantern a departed postboy had left swinging, and it took hold in the dry summer hay with a speed that no water through a roof ever had, and the first Sarah knew of it was the colt's screaming, because the colt's stall was under the loft that was burning. She was down the loft ladder and into the yard in her shift, with a horse blanket in her fist, before she was properly awake, and she was throwing the blanket in the trough and hauling it out sodden and going into the smoke with it over her own head, and the only other soul in the yard was Ashcott, who slept light and had smelled it, and the two of them met at the door of the burning stable in the red dark, with 11 horses between them and the fire. There is no time, in a stable fire, for anyone to declare anything. "The colt first," she shouted. "He is nearest the loft, and he will not go for anyone but me. You take the far end. The grey mare will lead the others. If you get her out, they will follow her. Do not try to drive them. Lead her, and they come." And he did exactly as she said, this man who had commanded nothing in 3 years, because she knew, and he trusted the knowing, and they went into the smoke. She got a wet blanket over the colt's eyes, so he could not see the fire, and led him out screaming into the yard, and turned him loose into the far paddock, and went back in. Ashcott had the grey mare, and 4 followed her, as Sarah had said they would, streaming out into the dark, and he went back in for the rest, and Sarah went in beside him, and they worked the stalls in the choking red murk, passing horses between them, hand to hand, task needing 2, no accident about the touch, and no formality either now, only her hand finding his in the smoke to pass a head collar and his closing over it, again and again, while the loft burned over their heads and rained down sparks. They got them all. 11 horses in the paddock and the stable roof coming in behind them, and Corney and the tapster's boy, and 2 men from the village at the pump at last, but too late for the building, and in time only to keep it from the next. And Sarah and Ashcott stood together at the paddock rail, black to the elbows and streaming and shaking with it, and counting the horses over and over in the firelight to be sure, and everyone was there. Nothing was said. She had her hand on the top rail, and he put his over it, black and shaking, and neither of them looked at the other, they looked at the horses, and his hand stayed on hers until the fire was down, and that was the thing that passed between them that could not have been written in any book of accounts, and in the morning neither mentioned it, and both knew. The stable was a black ruin by daylight, and the yard had 11 live horses, and nowhere to put 8 of them, and the reckoning of what it would cost to rebuild came due at the worst possible hour, because Tulla had chosen it. He came into the yard in the grey morning while the timbers still smoked, with the corn factor at his side and a sheaf of papers, and he had a tale ready and an audience gathering, the village men and Corney and the boys, and he told it plainly and plausibly that the fire had been set, that the loft girl, who had come from nowhere and made herself so busy, had left a lantern burning in the loft where she slept and taken the whole stable with it, and that a woman with no character and no place, sleeping where she had no right, was the author of the ruin and ought to answer for it before she cost them the whole inn. It was well done. It put her guilt and her strangeness in the same breath, and she stood there black from the fire, with her hands burned, and had, for a moment, no way to prove a lantern in a burning loft had not been hers, because the loft was ash. But the proof of a fire is not always in the ashes. Sometimes it is in the thing everyone has already seen and not read. Sarah did not raise her voice. The lantern that started it was hung on the third tie-beam of the far loft, she said, over the colt's stall, on the hook that has been there 40 years for the loft lantern. My loft is the near one, over the harness room, at the other end of the yard, and my lantern is in it now, cold, where it has been every night, and any man here may go and put his hand on it, and feel that it is cold, and has been cold for hours. I do not hang a lantern in a hayloft. No one who knows horses hangs a lit lantern in a hayloft. That is the first thing a stableman learns, and the last thing he forgets. She looked at the gathered men. The lantern that burned was left swinging by the postboy Dice, who went for wages at the Bell 3 weeks since, and who hung it there the night he left because he was drunk and careless, and it has hung there dead ever since with oil in it, and last night the heat of the day and a following wind through the broken slat set it swinging against the beam. Half of you have walked under it. Go and look at the hook. The hook will be there in the char. The near loft has no hook, because I mend in the harness room by a lamp on a bracket, and you have all seen the bracket. The men went and looked. The hook was there in the char of the far loft. Iron survives fire, and there was no hook in the near, and her cold lantern was where she said it was, and the thing came apart in the space of a minute, not because a paper had been found in a box, but because a woman who knew stables had told a yard of men where to put their hands, and they put them there, and the char told the truth she had read in it. And then it was Tulla's turn to come apart, in front of them all, and it was not a pleasant thing to watch. He tried the plausible voice, that she was mistaken, that the girl would say anything, and the voice, that had carried him 2 years, found no purchase, because the men were looking at the hook, and not at him. He tried the appeal to his service, 2 years of faithful ordering, and it landed on Corny, who said only, "Aye, and I've wondered 2 years why our corn came dear and foul, Tulla, and now I know, and so does everyone." And that was the moment Tulla understood the room had already decided. He did not rage. He went quiet, which was worse, the plausible man discovering that plausibility is a thing lent by an audience and taken back all at once. The corn factor was already stepping away from him, already becoming a man who had merely come about a debt and knew nothing of any corn. Sarah could have finished him. The yard would have let her. She had the bin and the book and the burns on her hands and every man there on her side, and one more sentence would have had him before a magistrate. She did not say it. "You have a wife in the town, Mr. Tulla," she said, quietly, so that only the near men heard, "and she is not in this. Take your factor and your papers and go, and do not send in your account, and it will go no further than this yard. That is more than you left me, standing here this morning. Take it and go." He went, and nothing else happened in that yard after she said it. The men drifted back to the smoking timbers, and the mercy was the last thing, and it cost her the satisfaction she had every right to, and she let it. That evening, when it was over, Sarah went into the harness room and put her burned hands flat on the bench and understood the thing she had been not letting herself understand since the night of the fire. Corny found her there. He had brought salve for her hands, and he sat down heavily and took one of them in his old fingers and began to work the salve into the burns without asking, the way he did everything now, too tired for ceremony. "You saved the whole of it today," he said, "the horses and the yard and the man's good name, for it was his stable burned, and his fault it would have been called, an idle master, if you had not stood there and told them the truth of it." "I told them where the hook was," she said. "The hook did the rest." You know that is not the whole of it. I know it is the whole of what I can have, she said, and there it was, plain, in the lamplight. Listen to me, Corny, because I will say it once, and then put it down. I am a loft girl who reads corn bins. He is the man who owns the inn. He is grateful to me, and gratitude in a man like him, who cannot say a warm word, comes out as a lamp on a bracket and a knife sharpened on a wall. And I have been reading those, the way a fool reads a hand of cards she wants to win. He is paying a debt. I mended his yard and his colt and his good name, and he is a decent man, and a decent man pays what he owes, and that is all a lamp is. It is a receipt. Her voice did not break. She would not let it. He will rebuild the stable now, because the yard is worth saving, and he will need someone to run it, and he may even offer it to me, and I will have a wage at last and a place, and I will stand in that yard for 20 years, being paid for what I did for nothing, and watching him not say the warm word, because there is no warm word owed to the woman who runs your stable. That is what is real. The rest is what I have been telling myself in the loft at night, and I am done telling it, because a woman who has had the road cannot afford to lie to herself about where the walls are. Sarah, no, do not. She took her hand back, gently. Do not be kind to me about it, because kindness will make me cry, and I have not cried yet, and I do not mean to start over a thing I always knew. I knew it on the Kesterly Road in the rain. I would not get in his carriage, because there was his name on the panel, and none on me, and that was the truest thing I have said since I came. The name is still on the panel. Nothing has changed but that I have grown fond, and being fond is my own affair and no one else's, and I will manage it. She stood and picked up the salve, and her voice was quite steady. Thank you for my hands. Go to bed. It has been a long day for old men and loft girls both. Corny went. Sarah sat a while longer with the lamp, the one at the height of her hand, and then she blew it out herself, and went up to the loft in the dark, and did not cry, and that was the harder thing. She meant to be gone within the week. It seemed the only clean way. She waited until the yard was quiet the next evening, and she went to the small parlour to tell him she would stay only until the new stable was raised and a man hired, and then take her wage and go north, and she had the words ready and flat in her mouth. But Ashcott was not in the parlour. Corny said he had ridden into the town after the fire and not said why, which was unlike him, and Sarah thought bitterly that it would be about the insurance or the timber, the practical business of a practical man, and she went back to the harness room to wait out the last of her waiting, and it was there, an hour later, that she said the thing aloud to the empty room and the one person left in it. I am going to leave, she told the grey mare, who had put her head over the half-door, because there was no one else and the words wanted saying to something living. I am going to raise your stable and plait your tail one last vain time, and take my wage and go north, and you will have a good man to run you, and he will not know you like a stitched plait, and I am not going to think about that. She leaned her forehead on the mare's neck. I have had the road before, and I will have it again, and the road is not the worst thing. The worst thing is a lamp at the height of your hand that turns out to be a receipt. I will not have that in front of me every day. I would rather the rain. And she had said it to a horse in an empty harness room with no one to hear, exactly as the profile of her own life required, and Ashcott was not in the doorway and did not hear it and did not come, because he was still 4 miles off on the town road, and the scene was allowed to end, and she wiped her face on her sleeve and went up to the loft to begin, in the morning, to pack. It was the following forenoon. in the full light, in the wrecked yard with the whole household in it, and the timbermen come to price the rebuilding, that Ashcott rode back in and got down and did the thing he had not done in 3 years, which was to say a true thing out loud in front of everyone. He was bad at it. He stood in the middle of his own smoked yard, with the reins still in his hand, and the whole of the Marigold watching, Corny and the boys and the timbermen, and Sarah with a bundle half made in her arms, for she had been on her way to the carrier's cart, and he could not find the beginning of it, and started twice, and stopped. "I went to the town," he said, to the attorney, "to have it drawn up." He stopped again. His jaw worked. "Not the stable. I had the stable in it too, but that is not." He looked at the paper in his hand, and then did not look at it. "I am no good at this. I have not said a true thing aloud in 3 years, because every true thing I ever said turned out a lie, and I could not bear to be the fool again. So I say things by doing them. The lamp. I put up the lamp." He said it to her, across the yard, in front of all of them. "I have watched you mend my horses and my yard and my name, and last night my own good name that I had let rot, and I let you do all of it and said nothing, and you thought. Corny told me this morning what you thought, that it was a debt, that the lamp was a receipt." His voice went rough. "It was not a receipt. I do not know the words for what it was. I have gone and had a paper drawn that makes you master of the yard, because you have earned it 10 times. But that is not. The paper is the coward's half. This is the other half, and I am saying it in front of everyone, so I cannot take it back into silence. I would have your name on the panel beside mine, Sarah Vane, if you would let me put it there. Not the yard. You. That is the thing I could not say by doing. It was under 200 words, and he made a poor job of it, and it was the truest thing anyone in that yard had ever heard him say." Sarah stood with her half-made bundle and her burned hands and looked at him, and the yard was very quiet. "You had a paper drawn," she said. "2 papers. The yard, and the attorney thought I was mad. I said them both so badly. You rode 4 miles at night after a fire to have papers drawn," she said, "and you could not say a warm word to save your life, so you went to a lawyer to say it for you in the only language you trust, which is a thing done and not spoken." Something was happening in her face that she was not fighting. "And then you came home and said it anyway, out loud, in front of Corny and the timbermen and God." "Yes," he said, "badly, very badly. I am aware." "Keep on," she said, which was what she had told him on the mounting block in the gold light, and this time she was crossing the yard while she said it. "Bundle and all, you will get the way of it." And she put the bundle down on the water trough, where she had once plaited the mare's tail out of pure idleness, and she took his blackened, paper-holding hand in her burned one, and that was the whole of the reaching, done at last with a reason that was no reason at all, except itself. The stable was raised again before the leaves turned, and the yard did not die, though the road went along the valley bottom as the commissioners had voted. Sarah ran it, and was paid for it, and was also, which is a different and better thing, married to the man who owned it, so that her name did go on the panel after all. The grey mare lived to be very old and vain. The colt turned into a horse that Ashcott himself broke to harness, in no hurry, with hands that had remembered they knew how. Corny poured drink another 6 years, and told the story of the bishop and the goose, until the goose was the size of a calf, and Sarah looked surprised every single time, because he was wounded if she did not, and she loved him. Tulla was seen a year on keeping a toll house 40 miles off, diminished and dull and by every account honest now that dishonesty had cost him everything, which is a kind of ending a man might actually live. And Ashcott learned, slowly, over years, to say the small warm things aloud, and was never fluent at it, and that was part of why she never tired of hearing them. The rain came down the Kesterly road every autumn, as it always had, and there came a wet afternoon years later when Sarah, driving the gig back from the town, passed a girl walking the hill in the downpour, soaked and stubborn and going nowhere good, and stopped and leaned across and opened the door herself. "Get in," she said. "There is nothing in it to fear, and the panel has my own name on it as well as his, which took some doing. Get in out of the rain." And the girl, who had been about to refuse a carriage for reasons Sarah knew better than anyone alive, looked at the name on the panel and got in. "So tell me, before you go back to your own evening, when someone hangs a lamp at the exact height of your hand and says not one word about it, do you read it as a receipt, or do you read it as the thing a person means and cannot say? Come back, and I will tell you another, and mind the rain on the way home."